The information contained in this video is strictly for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or other professional advice and is not a substitute for consultation with a qualified professional. The opinions expressed in the show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and the City University of New York. State of Mind is a web-based discussion program that explores the relevant social, economic, and political issues that are prominent at the post-secondary level of education. State of Mind is sponsored by the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC. Start here, go anywhere. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Today we're kicking off a three-part series entitled The Cost of Education. Today's topic is about saving for college. The Department of Agriculture's annual Cost of Raising a Child report stated that the average middle-income family in the United States can expect to spend about $245,000 over 18 years to raise a child. When it comes to the cost of sending that same child to college, parents and prospective students can expect to spend up to the same amount of money in the subsequent 4 years. With college tuitions constantly rising and the economy still recovering from the 2008 financial crisis, it begs the question that parents and students all across the country are faced to ask. How am I going to save for college? With us here today to help better understand the various perspectives on the topic are the following guests. To my immediate left is Reyna Gobel. Reyna is a freelance journalist, author, and student loans expert. She's a Forbes education contributor and author of Graduation Debt: How Smart Students Pay for School. In addition to contributing to various other publications such as U.S. News, Money Magazine, and The Washington Post, her work can be found on her website, graduationdebt.org. Ms. Gobel holds an MBA and a Master of Journalism from the University of North Texas. To her immediate left is Debra Chromy. Debra is the president of the Education Financial Council, a national trade association representing nonprofit and state agency student loan organizations. Ms. Chromy, who joined EFC in September as its president, has spent her career working at both for-profit and nonprofit organizations in the student loan industry. She received her bachelor's degree in economics from Smith College, her MBA from Boston University, and her doctorate in higher education management from the University of Pennsylvania. And finally, Joseph Brusuelas is the chief economist for McGladrey Incorporated. He specializes in analyzing the U.S. economy and monetary policy. Mr. Brusuelas has spent more than 20 years of experience in finance and economics, serving either as chief economist or senior economist at various firms. He holds a BA and MA from San Diego State University and a PhD from the University of Southern California. Reyna, Debra, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Now, for those of us who have seen previous episodes of State of Mind, you may recall that my wife recently gave birth to my first child this past summer. As I find myself now in the same predicament as many other parents in that I'm trying to navigate through the various costs that come to raising a child. With that said, I'd like to kick off our show with the following question for you, Debra. Sure. As a parent, when does the saving process start for college?
It should start as early as possible. That being said, if you haven't started yet and your child is now in middle school or starting high school, it's never too late. Always start saving as soon as you can.
And so to the same extent of what to save for, and I think this is something that even I myself find very confusing. What am I saving for? Am I saving for a certain type of school? Am I saving for a certain type of education? Is that what I should be concentrating and thinking about?
No, because I think that can become very overwhelming, and you don't know. Your child is 3 months old,
yes.
So you don't know what that child's going to be interested in, whether you're going to end up at a private or public. So put those things out of your mind and focus on saving what you can save. And my advice to families is to think about savings as a combination of loans and savings. So save what you can. People get overwhelmed when they think about, it's $100,000 or $200,000, and they freeze. They think, I can't possibly save that amount of money. So don't think about it that way. Think about saving what you can save, and then know that when it comes time to look at colleges, it may be a combination of savings, some scholarships and grants, and some loans.
Excellent. Reyna, do you have any thoughts on that? As someone who runs graduationdebt.org, what are your thoughts in terms of the saving process?
Yeah, I mean, I write on this a lot as a Forbes contributor, and I'm always worried about parents who email me saying, I just got laid off, I want to cash in my 401k to pay for my kids' college education. I'm like, no, don't do that. I think that it starts as early as possible, but it doesn't even have to be just your money. Ask friends, ask family. Like when you have a birthday party for your child, GradSave does this. All the 529 plans, these are college investment accounts that grow tax-free. All the states have them, and they'll help you set them up. It's really easy to do. And you can do like these gifting lists. Grandparents that used to send you savings bonds now can send you college education money. So every little bit helps. I mean, you get $25 contributions from 20 people over the course of a year from a couple of events for your child, and that's $500. Over 18 years, that's $9,000. And don't expect that you have to pay for every penny of your child's education. They're responsible for it too, and they've got a lot more years to pay it back than you do. Just when they get there, you can talk to them about borrowing smartly, but in the meantime, just save what you can, but don't do it at the expense of your own savings or your own retirement.
Thank you. Joe, from an economic standpoint, have we become a nation that just automatically kicks into this mindset that we have to put money aside for college? And has it always been the case historically?
Well, no. I mean, I think it's actually the opposite, is that the astronomical rise in the cost of attending college and obtaining a higher education is moved so fast, so quickly, that your median household is sort of caught behind the curve. I think for many years, most people just assumed that they could sort of pay for it out of pocket as it arrived. I mean, you know, the advent of student loans as we know them now really is a late 80s, early 90s phenomenon. So for many years, I mean, getting student loans was very, very difficult. It's quite a bit easier now, and of course, we'll talk about that. I think the important thing here is that it's important for households to think strategically over a long period of time. That you want to get started on your savings sooner rather than later. You want to take advantage, if you can, of the 529 investment savings vehicles that the government sponsors. I think that you also want to think holistically here. College isn't necessarily the be-all, end-all here. It's the development of skill sets as your child grows. There may be a necessity to draw on some of those savings to put them in after-school programs that teach quantitative or language skills on the way, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to oversave for somebody who doesn't end up developing the skill sets, because we're all quite aware of some of the real problems in our public system of education, especially with the transmission of science, technology, engineering, and math. We all do a very good job of talking about it, but I mean, as somebody who's hired people over the past several years, I mean, I've seen some very shoddy outcomes of people who go to very good schools with very interesting degrees from reputable institutions, and the skill sets just aren't there.
So just for our audience to make sure that we're all on the same page, we mentioned the 529 plan a few times. Deborah, do you mind taking a second just to elaborate what that is?
Sure. As Reyna mentioned, many states have 529 plans, and they're really investment plans. It's an opportunity for families to contribute money. It's not tax-free when it goes in, but the money that accumulates in that account is tax deferred. And when payments are made towards college to the beneficiary, to the student, there's no tax on it either. So it's a great way to do it, and in individual states, there may be tax benefits as well. So it's really important to take a look and understand what's happening in each state. There are some benefits in some states and not in others, so it's really good to understand that. That being said, if you use a 529 in New York and your child ends up going to school in California, that's fine. It doesn't matter which state they go to school in, that's all transferable. Also, if you live in New York, you don't have to use the 529 in New York, you could use one in another state. You can look to see what has the best investment returns and which one you'd like.
Please, Reyna.
The only thing you want to be careful of if you do choose another state's plan is, does your state's tax benefit for the state income tax allow it? Because a lot of states don't if you don't choose the state plan. And for instance, on a state like New York, if that were the case, we have high income taxes.
Yes, we do.
And you do not want to be penalized for choosing another state's plan because it had $5 in lower fees and you just cost yourself $700 in taxes.
Right. So when we talk about using this money towards education, what do we define that as? Undergraduate studies, graduate studies, a vocational school, community college, junior college? Is there any limit, any extent as to what the 529 is, being able to be directed towards?
Well, the limit is generally just that it's something that's accredited and allowed. You want to check the rules. You also want to check the state rules on what it can go towards. But a lot of times what it can be used for, too, is, let's say you just want to do some sort of developmental course.
Right.
As long as it's accredited and it's allowed, then you can do that. That's why, because of the tax penalties, if you don't use it for education, a lot of people use it later in life, or even give it back to their parents to say, okay, mom and dad, I'm done with college. Now you can use it to go back to school or get the training. You need a certificate maybe to go further in your career.
I see. So I'd like to take myself as an example because I'm going through this as we speak right now. You talked about a combination of savings plus debt as something that we should look at, Debra. Is this the new norm now? Because I can't predict 18 years from now what college will cost. As you said, I shouldn't think that way. I shouldn't think about what type of school my child will go to. I shouldn't think about whether it's in-state or out-of-state, public or private. It's just so superficial at this point. So what type of strategy should I put in place right now, day one?
So I'll tell you a little story. So I have a lot of friends who have started having children, and when they have children, I give them as a gift a $100 check, and I say it's to start a savings account for your child, a 529 plan. I usually include information about the savings plan in that state for them. And they feel so guilty about the fact that they haven't started one, that they actually go out and open up an account. And what's really great, as Reyna mentioned earlier, then as birthdays and Christmases or holidays come along, you can say to families, instead contribute to that. So a great strategy is to involve families in contributing and getting people to pay in early. And I'd love for this idea that other people to start doing this, to start getting folks started early. But to the point of you know, thinking about what are the other factors you have to think about, it just becomes so overwhelming. I say save what you can save. Don't be so frugal that you don't enjoy your child growing up and taking vacations and living your life. You need to have a balance of the two and just save what you can.
I see.
Now, you know, Krishna, we can't tell where education inflation is going. We don't know what taxes are going to look like 20 years out, but there's a certain demographic reality. And, you know, if you're somebody who's going to CUNY now, maybe you're an undergraduate or a graduate, in a few years, just a statistical probability, you may be forming somewhat of a neo-traditional household, children may follow. Okay, so 20 years from now, it's going to be a very different demography here in the United States. The number of people who are aged 20 to 64 is a ratio of those aged 65 and older is going to change significantly. We're going to move essentially from around 25% to 40%. Right. Government resources are not indefinite, right? They're finite. And my sense is, as the baby boomers age and the demand for medical services and other post-work year services multiply, there's going to be a squeeze on cash available. And so unfortunately, if you're a millennial, right, who's come of age now and who's going to be starting a family in the next 5 to 7 years, you need to be preparing yourself for a different reality in terms of will the government always subsidize student loans at the same rate? Right? We don't know that, but my sense is, given where we are in sort of the fiscal cycle and given the slower growth rate in the United States, one should assume that they're going to have take greater responsibility for providing financing for their own child's education. And if that means you buy a house and you own a house and you try to own it, and maybe you have to refinance later on to help put your child through school, this is something you want to begin thinking about in your mid to late 20s. So when the time comes 20 years from now, you're ready to do it.
So let's talk about the millennial generation right now. These are individuals that were born, I guess, 1980 to 2000, and who are now either in college, recently finished college, or just about to enter college. Very different generation from Generation X, and a very different generation from the baby boomers. What type of things do those that are about to enter college need to think about? You know, we talked about parents should think about how they should go about planning and saving for college. How should millennials think about saving for college as well?
Okay,
Joe,
so the traditional work relationships are changing at a very rapid pace. You shouldn't assume that you're going to work for a company for a long period of time. In fact, you may end up working as a contract worker or just, you know, independently self-employed. So you're not going to have those 401k matching programs, right? That some people have 50 to 100% depending on the company where you work at. So you have to take a very proactive stance in terms of organizing your own financial life, whether it's savings for your own retirement, savings for your child's education, or savings for your first big capital purchase, which is typically some sort of domicile. I think that for the millennials, it's very, very difficult right now. The employment to population ratio of those aged 25 to 34 is lower than it's been in over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually is a fairly significant economic problem.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how, as someone who's a parent, and at the very beginning of this cycle, Debra, that I shouldn't worry about the superficials. I shouldn't worry about what type of school or where it's located or what type of education will be provided. But what if you are a rising junior or a rising senior and you're trying to pay, save for college? You are trying to get a part-time job.
Right.
You're trying to get federal aid. Are those factors now a little bit more important? And what type of things should they be looking at to plan accordingly? Because there is going to be that gap.
Right.
And how do they make sure they make it as small as possible?
Well, and there are a number of different things that folks can take a look at. My own sister, what she did is her children went to community college for 2 years and then transferred to, very well-known state universities. And when you graduate from that institution, your degree only has the name of that institution on it. It never says you spent 2 years at a community college.
Right.
But they got the education for half the price. That's one strategy that families look at. If they're looking at colleges, they may consider living at home. Everybody wants to have the experience of being away at college and living in a dorm, but a great way to save money is to, if you're going to a college that's in commuting distance, is to live at home, and that cuts a huge, so it's about thinking about all those other aspects of things that you might be able to do to bring down the cost of the college.
And I think another thing that I preach a lot, which is actually one of my favorite things to talk about, and I've talked about in a few of my Forbes articles, is the idea of being a good consumer of college. And it makes sense, like I should start at a community college, but sometimes your cheapest option is a private school such as Stanford or Harvard that just happens to really subsidize students that need the money. So you'll see poor students that may have straight A's and great SATs, and they won't apply to these schools because they think they can't afford it. Really think about what schools match your interests, that you've done shadow days and career experience, that you know what you want to do, and that in the college search process, that you're actually talking to professors and people on campus, including financial aid. Because when you narrow that list down to the 10 or 12 that you're going to actually apply to, there should be a good mix, and your high school counselor, who, by the way, they have master's degrees now and can really help you.
Really?
Will be able to, mine was the football coach.
Okay.
And so, but they can actually help you think about, and even a student right now that's in community college can go back to their high school counselor and ask for advice. You can get scholarships in your junior year. You can think about, I don't want to spend more than, I say for an undergraduate, don't borrow more than $40,000 ever for anything, because you don't really know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So just really think about those consumer angles. Don't avoid private schools. Find out from your high school counselor who's actually giving away money, and it's readily available because there's net price calculators on school websites required now. So I wouldn't just assume the state school is going to be the best, because often they don't have the same money. And also, if you're going to go to a community college, it's rumored that there's no scholarship money. Totally not true. There's scholarships at community college too, so make sure you apply to those.
I think the interesting thing is that you have to know the system which you want to go to school at. So I grew up in California, and we have a three-track system. We have community colleges, the state university system, and the University of California. If I was to go back and do it over again, knowing what I know now, I would have went to a community college for 2 or maybe 3 years. Found a matriculation agreement that was associated with the school I wanted to go into. You had feeders that went into USC, a private school, feeders in Northern California that went into Stanford, and of course around Los Angeles you had feeders that went into UCLA, right? I would have saved a tremendous amount of money. I would have gotten just a very high quality education, and I would have went to a school of my choice rather than where I went was based on what I could pay out of pocket. Because I just missed the liftoff in terms of student loans, right? And when I used to teach at the university, I always tell the kids there was a certain junior college in San Francisco area that I would have went to because it's one of the feeders into Stanford. And so you really want to understand and do some real legwork starting around the time you're in your sophomore year so that you understand where you're going and most importantly why, so then you can get a sense of how to pay for it.
So I just want to make sure, that was going to lead to my next question. We talked about as parents we should start right away in terms of finding ways to save for college. For students, when does that awareness come? You had mentioned sophomore year of high school.
Well, right. I mean, things have changed tremendously in the 20 years since, I was 30 years since I was in high school. But then it was, the ninth grade didn't count. It was 10th through the middle part of your senior year. That's when your grades really started. That's when you started taking the practice SATs and the practice ACTs. And that's when you tended to get serious. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have a system of counselors that could service the needs of the very large suburban high school I went. So it was really, you were on your own. With the number of people who are educated now, the number of parents who have educations, they've probably got a much better feel for it. And I think it does start at home. You can't count on this public system of education to fill in the gaps. They can sort of push you in a general direction, but then you have to ultimately take responsibility for it.
Right.
So I'd like to go
Please.
back to something Reyna talked about earlier, which is the Ivy Leagues, or the really Smith.
Yeah.
When I was going to college, I applied to a state university and to Smith. It was less expensive for me to go to Smith because of the grants and scholarships provided by the endowment. So I just want to underscore the point that Reyna made, that don't limit yourself to the community colleges or state universities. Look at some of the more elite colleges, because if your grades are good and you're a good applicant, they will give you grants and scholarships. And I went back on, last night I went back on the website, the college scorecard, and I put in, and I looked, and it's still true.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
So from that standpoint, go ahead, please.
Oh, and it's not even just these elite Ivy League schools. A lot of small liberal arts colleges, because they want a student that's better than their average student as far as grades, will do that. And those transfer agreements are wonderful. And the easiest way to do it is talk to the admissions department at the school you ultimately want to go to. But at the same time, if Stanford's going to give you a full ride year one, why go to the community college first?
Right.
And how those transfer agreements work is generally you have to maintain a certain GPA, and you can also make sure that you're working with your ultimate school the whole time, that they're involved as much in planning what you're taking at as the community college can. And you can, do local internships where they may work with those community college students and the Stanford students, so you're getting both. So you can network like crazy. And the best thing parents can do, no matter whether they are saving for college or not, or they're saving $25 a month, what is more valuable than that is teaching their kids financial education, showing them that I've got to save for my retirement too. This is what college is going to cost. You need to apply for X scholarships. You need to save X from part-time jobs so that I will help you. And you need to show me that you're worth spending my money on, which means that you are doing your best in school and you are doing shadow days, which is basically spending a couple hours with a professional, knowing what you want, showing me that you actually do want that career path, so that I do want to help you along with it.
Definitely sounds like some tough love, that's for
Yes.
sure. But is that where we live now? Do we live in a society where the awareness of cost starts at a very young age, cost of everything, but in this case education, where it sounds like the savvy student is the one who's going to end up on top, the one who not only looks at the quality of the education, but the cost of it as well. You had hinted about this, Joe, is that we can't look at things without having the repercussions of what they have long-term on us anymore.
Right.
And live in a bubble.
The irony of this from just a purely economic standpoint is the more subsidies we give to these institutions of education, the higher the cost that they charge is, because they know that student loans are going to be there.
Right.
So we've had this astronomical inflation in educational cost over the last 20 years. Now my sense is that we're going to be in a period of deflation in higher education. If you read Chronicle of Higher Education, they've been talking about this for the past 5 years. The educational professionals saw what happened during the financial crash and ensuing Great Recession, and it was pretty clear that there was going to be a slowdown in demand for spots at the schools. And indeed, if you look at applications, or the rate of applications are falling, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if educational costs ease. Now my fear is that policymakers are going to take this as a signal not to do anything. Because my sense is that we're entering a period of great reform in the country. We're going to have massive tax entitlement reform. We're going to have to build roads, bridges, ports, pipelines, and broadband in the country to modernize the infrastructure of the country. What I'm hoping is, in whatever great bargain ensues, that we don't forget that the middle class is going to have to have access to education, and we're probably going to have some form of subsidies that support that. But it's also very important that families understand how the system of finance for education works at a very early age. Again, because the ultimate responsibility does fall on you. Even if you choose to go to a school that you can finance almost out of pocket, you want to think about these things well in advance, 5 to 10 years ahead of the point of entry.
Okay. So with that said, I want to talk about some non-academic institutions, such as the Education Finance Council. Debra, can you talk about what your organization is doing in light of some of the commentary that Joe just provided?
Sure. So EFC, Education Finance Council, is a trade organization that represents nonprofit and state student loan agencies that are in 31 states across the country, or there are 31 members in states across the country. And they are really the go-to planning resource in many of their states. Our organizations are loan servicers. They provide alternative loans that are created through tax-exempt bond financing, so they're actually very low cost, in some cases less expensive than some of the federal programs, and have great forgiveness programs depending on what state you're in. But they also have a lot of college planning services where they'll go out into the high schools and do high school nights. They have centers right at their location where families can walk in with financial aid award letters from a couple of different schools and sit down, and someone will help explain to them what everything means and give them information to empower them to make a decision that's good for them. They do FAFSA completion nights, free application for federal student aid, and they will do those where people can come in and get help and assistance in filling out their FAFSA form. So there are all of these resources that are available. They also can point them in directions of grants and scholarships, and one of the things we haven't talked a lot about, I think Reyna touched on it, was scholarships. And one of the strategies I think starts as early as sort of the junior year is to start doing that research. And there is money out there. It takes work. You've got to write a lot of essays. You've got to do a lot of research. There's a lot of heavy lifting to it. But I know a couple of people who have gotten, even at community college, a full ride through scholarships. So it can be done. So those resources. So EFC is there in a number of states. And even where our member organizations are not present, there are other organizations within that state. Your high school guidance counselor, as you mentioned, they now have master's degrees.
Master's degrees.
Yeah, should be aware of all of those services that are available within the state. Going to the colleges that you're thinking about going to, they'll be aware. And many times there are scholarships that are available only, or grants only at that institution. And it may be that you have to have grown up in a particular town or a particular county or be studying in a STEM field or whatever it may be that you may qualify for.
So all that information, I'm assuming, can be found on your website, which is?
Yes, EFC.org.
Okay.
And it will only list the organizations so you can look and see which one's in your state. But I wanted to mention two other websites. One is savingforcollege.com, which has a list of all the 529 plans in states. You can actually click on your state and see where that's available. And the other one is collegesavings.org, which are both good college savings websites to use.
Reyna, do you have any other resources that you would like to mention to our audience in terms of saving for college? I know that you do a lot on graduationdebt.org.
Yeah, Saving for College is the website you mentioned, is a wonderful website for comparing 529 plans. I just wanted to add, when it comes to looking for scholarships, don't ever do that in replacement of your grades and your extracurriculars.
Of course.
Make sure that it's in balance with the rest of your life, because all this is balance. One resource that I want to put out there is that if you are talking to financial planners or any kind of person that is helping you, to make sure they are thinking about your overall picture. Millennials are going to have their own student loans to deal with when they're talking about this. So I definitely think everyone should go to Graduation Debt if they have their own student loans. I have the book on graduation debt as well. I think that one thing that I'm really focusing on right now is educating financial advisors on how to make this part of someone's overall planning. So I'm going to be teaching workshops throughout the year here at BMCC, as well as online workshops for people across the country for the Institute of Financial Literacy, and you can find information on that on my website as well. And anytime you have a question for me, just tweet me at Reyna Gobel.
We will. And remember, kids, stay in school, work on those grades in spite of all this. We will be talking about student debt in our next episode, but at this point in time, Reyna, Debra, Joe, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
On that note, that's going to wrap up our show for today. I'd like to once again thank our guests for joining us and offering their very unique perspectives. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. With that said, if If you have any comments, feedback, or even criticisms, feel free to email me or send me a message through Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.